Piers Morgan is such a sack of fucking shit. But I haven't actually made a good comprehensive video criticizing Piers Morgan. So I think that's long overdue. So I'm just going to take this random Piers Morgan video where he is talking to Lowkey about Palestine, Gaza, Hamas, Israel, and I'm going to react to it in real time without having anything prepared. So everything is just free flow off the top of my head. I did watch bits and pieces of it before, but other than that, I'm just going to be reacting to it in the same way that we're watching it right now. Okay, so let's just watch it and I'll react to it.
Given that you categorize what Israel did to Hezbollah with the pages, you said it was an act of terror. Was what Hamas did on October the 7th an act of terrorism?
The killing by the...
So he's doing the whole what about Hamas thing, but this is the introduction, so let's just get through the introduction.
Israeli Air Force of Israeli citizens was an act of terror.
Well, you haven't answered my question.
But I'm answering your question.
No, I'm talking about mass murder of people on October the 7th.
By the Israeli military.
See, it's just absurd.
As I said to you then, the picture is not clear of what exactly Hamas did to Israelis.
You are incredibly ill-informed about this.
I'm not concerned about whether you think or don't think I have credibility. I have a question for you.
Well, hang on.
Based on
you
what
stop
you just
asking
said
questions
about
for a minute.
But
At some point, Lowkey, you're going to have to answer some of my questions. Because I don't come at this from supporting either over the other.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a little preview, because I did see that part. He confronts Piers Morgan about being paid by Rupert Murdock, which is the reason for why Piers Morgan is so biased. He did actually tweet out some stuff that were highly critical of Israel many years ago. And I don't know for a fact, but I don't think he was being paid by Rupert Murdock back then. But anyway, let's just keep watching.
Well, many people know Lowkey as a rapper, a playwright, and a poet, but it's fair to say they even more know him as a fierce advocate for the rights of Palestinians and a fierce critic of Israel. The first and only time we've spoken was in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th. Israel and its supporters couldn't see beyond the horrors of that atrocity. Its critics were angered by how quickly it eclipsed decades of Palestinian suffering and heralded a great deal more. A lot has happened since then, but has anything really changed? Karim Dennis, better known as Lowkey, joins me in the studio now. And from Washington, D.C., I'm joined by the Lebanese-American author and activist Brigitte Gabriel. Well, welcome to both of you. Lowkey, we never met, so it's good to meet you. We had a pretty fiery exchange last time when I was in New York and you were here. Passions were running very high. I think it's fair to say from my experience of debates since, there's been no dilution in the way people feel about this. If anything, I think views are getting more and more entrenched as it goes on. What is your feeling about where we are now with this war and indeed the widening conflict with Israel apparently planning a ground incursion into Lebanon?
Well, that initial...
So this video is 6 months old, so some things will be dated, but that's not really important.
Interview, there were 3 things that I stated which have since come clearly to fruition. So the first thing that I stated was that Mark Regev belongs in The Hague. Israel is currently in the ICJ charged with genocide. I also said that what Israel was doing in Gaza in an accumulative way over decades would amount with the military operation that they were about to launch to genocide. And the third thing that I said, which has also now been proven to have been the case, is that the Israeli military unfortunately implemented the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. And that, just so viewers are aware, is when Israel, of course, it was initially developed in Lebanon while trying to suppress the Lebanese population and stop them from battling the Israeli occupation. And it's whereby Israel takes measures to kill the captives who are Israeli that have been taken by the other side. Now, that happened on October 7th, and it's since been proven in 3 different cases. It happened, unfortunately, after...
Okay, I just want to jump in here. What he's saying is correct. The Hannibal Directive is this unspoken directive where IDF are ordered to actually kill their own people before they are captured by Hamas to prevent their capture, even if it means killing them. And the reason why they do this is because those hostages are seen as a liability to Israel, and they trade very poorly in those exchanges, meaning they have to give up many, many more POWs, hostages of their own, in order to get get Israeli hostages back. So they actually rather kill their own people than let them fall into the enemy's hands as hostages. That is sick, and it's so hypocritical too, because Israel and all these Jewish supremacists pontificate and virtue signal about the value of Jewish life. And they do this all the time. It's a Jewish supremacist canard about how they try to elevate the lives of Jewish people above everyone else, as if their lives are more important than non-Jews, than the Goyim. But yet this is the true underbelly, that they are the ones who don't even care about Jews. They'd rather kill them than have them fall into the enemy's hands. They're sick. These are sick people.
After
It's been denied by Israel, to be clear.
it hasn't, though.
Who the fuck cares, Piers? Of course they're going to deny that, because they lie.
It's been denied by certain upper echelons of the Israeli political establishment, but there have been...
That pisses me off every time you have these BBC people, and the BBC has been caught for advancing Jewish supremacy. People have come out and have exposed their tactics, and they always platform the Israeli position, and they assert it as if it's true, when it's not. They lie. And Piers Morgan himself has even called out Israelis for lying. And so, like, why the fuck would you platform them? Well, we know why, because he's being paid by Rupert Murdock. So anyway.
Key figures within the Air Force that have acknowledged that this has taken place. It's also been revealed by the Al Jazeera investigation, and other places too have gone very deep into it.
But you wouldn't say that the absolute vast majority of people killed and wounded on October the 7th were indeed killed and wounded by Hamas, because...
They were. We know they were, because we have the photos. We saw the cars that were incinerated, and this was caused by Apache gunship fire. We don't know. I don't know specifically what weapons they used to cause that incineration, but these vehicles were scorched. It might have been Hellfire missiles, might have been rockets, might have even been caused by the 30mm autocannon firing incendiary rounds. I'm not entirely sure. But what I do know is that Hamas didn't cause that, because they didn't have the armaments to do that. Only the Apache gunships actually have that kind of firepower. And it was what's called a mass Hannibal. So yes, it was the IDF that killed most of their own people. These people are sick.
Apart from anything else, Hamas were boasting about it and filming it as they were doing it.
I think actually the majority of people that were killed on October 7th and off the back of the October 7th were the Palestinian fighters that entered into what is considered to be Israel.
But we know
because they were killed, they were run over by cars, their bodies were dismembered. There's footage that came out of them being killed.
You feel sorry for the Hamas terrorists
No,
that came
I'm
in?
stating objective facts as a journalist that has researched this topic.
But what about the 1,200?
I'm kind of curious. Does Piers feel bad for the IDF that rape and murdered children? The IDF have been murdering children and raping them. And then Israel turns right back around and turns these IDF soldiers into celebrities. And they did that.
100 people who they murdered and the 7,000 they wounded.
No. Hundreds of those people were killed when Israel implemented the Hannibal Directive.
That's simply not true.
It simply is true.
It isn't.
And I encourage you, in the spirit of journalistic inquiry and curiosity,
he'll never do that,
to really look that up.
It's already been thoroughly investigated.
It absolutely has not
But
been.
it has, Lowkey.
It's been investigated by Al Jazeera. It's been investigated by trustable news sources that have found this to be the case.
No, it's not true that hundreds of people in those
You saw the
named
footage.
casualty numbers on the Israeli side
Were killed by Israel.
Killed by Israel.
No, it's a fact. It's a
It's
documented
not
fact.
a
It's a
fact.
documented fact.
So all Piers is doing is just contradicting everything Lowkey is saying. That's not proof. We have the photos and we have the testimony from the IDF soldiers who were actually given this order, and they carried it out.
And you know what else? If you were to study those cars which were put forth as evidence that Hamas had killed those people fleeing the Nova Festival, the order came directly from the Israeli Air Force. This is a mass Hannibal. This is a dead zone. No cars will pass.
Did you watch the documentary?
Those cars
Did you watch
were
the
hit by
documentary
Apache.
last week on BBC Two?
No.
About the music festival.
Why on earth would anyone want to watch that propaganda bullshit? No, Piers. We're not going to watch your BBC propaganda. When the one thing I did see was the expose that revealed BBC as advancing Jewish supremacy, Zionism.
Right? You
No.
literally see Hamas fighters with their GoPros going from car to car, murdering people.
That happened. Yeah, that happened.
Why are you trying to diminish the scale of what was going on?
I've just said that happened. That doesn't equate to diminishing what you've just
doesn't
stated.
say hundreds of
You're
hundreds.
diminishing Apache helicopters bombing cars that contained civilians. You're diminishing all of the Israeli captives that have been killed by Israeli airstrikes. Israeli captives have come out of Gaza and said very clearly that actually they were scared of being killed by Israeli airstrikes.
Why are
They
there
were not.
hostages at all?
See, he didn't acknowledge that point. That pisses me off because this is like the one thing Piers Morgan is good at doing is he's good at using fallacies. He doesn't address the point. Instead, he jumps to another point when his point is defeated.
Well, this is, of course, an issue of 70 years of occupation, of dispossession, of ethnic cleansing,
You
of
wouldn't support the
attritional
taking of hostages,
genocide.
including Holocaust.
Okay, all right, Piers, you stupid fuck. It's asymmetrical warfare. And in warfare, you do anything in order to gain an advantage. That's why Hamas took those hostages, because Israel was ethnically cleansing Palestinians, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank with those illegal settlements and the murders. They were murdering not only Palestinian people, they were murdering journalists who were covering this, and there was no accountability. There was a journalist, woman journalist, who was shot in the back by an IDF sniper. And this guy is still free, never prosecuted. And so it was this impunity, the lack of accountability, that gave rise to this military operation that was committed by Hamas, in which they needed to take POWs, hostages, whatever you want to call them, and use them as leverage in negotiations. But what it actually did, in addition to that, was it revealed the true face of Israel, because the Palestinians knew how the Israelis were monsters this entire time, but the rest of the world didn't know. But because of October 7th, now the whole world can see the true monstrous face of Israel. It was unfortunately necessary. Regardless of how you feel about it, it was necessary. And from their perspective, whether you agree with it or not, the ends justify the means. And you can think that's monstrous. You can think that's horrible and wrong and that they're bad. But from their perspective, it was necessary.
Holocaust survivors and babies. You wouldn't support that.
I wouldn't take hostages, no.
So should they hand them back?
I think if you look historically at where the return of actual hostages has happened, you look at the case of Gilad Shalit, this was a case where an Israeli soldier was given back in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners. What you've actually seen in this case is a massive increase of Palestinian prisoners who are being tortured. There's been examples of rape within Israeli military camps. The rapists have come out and become celebrities within Israeli society.
I was just talking about that. And I'll also add that Israel kidnaps people, kidnaps Palestinian people who are not terrorists. They're just civilians not doing anything wrong. They'll kidnap them, and then they do this kangaroo court thing, which is a military tribunal. And since it's a military tribunal, they are not given due process at all. No trial, no nothing. They're just thrown in prison. And that's what Israel does. in order to basically use these kidnapped people, and they are kidnapped people hostages on Israel's side, to use in these trading of POWs hostages, whatever you want to call them, with Hamas. Every time Israel releases hostages that they have, they go and kidnap more. That's how sick these people are, how villainous, how monstrous, how criminal they are.
68% of the Israeli population say they oppose the prosecuting of people that have been implicated in rape within the dungeon system. And if you really look at it, Israel has far more chance of returning hostages by negotiating for their release than by airstriking them. What Israel has done as part of this campaign is airstrike and kill its own captives, the captives.
How would you have responded on October the 8th if you were running the Israeli government?
See, I hate it. Like, Piers Morgan asks this question of every pro-Palestinian guest on the show, and it's so moronic. Like, what do you want them to say? That they would commit genocide just like Israel's doing, Piers? You stupid fuck.
Ultimately,
the biggest terror attack on your people ever.
Ultimately, it is within the interests of everybody, especially those who identify as Israelis currently, to end Zionism. Zionism has dispossessed and disempowered and killed people on an industrial scale. Its maintenance requires 4 generations of Palestinian refugees scattered throughout the Middle East, the highest population of refugees there is in the world. Its maintenance requires the constant repression of Palestinian hopes for a better world.
Which I think...
Because all Zionism ever was, despite what Jewish supremacists and Zionists would tell you, all Zionism ever was an Ashkenazi separatist movement. It was part of the scramble for Africa. So it really is just nothing but a settler colonial movement to steal land that wasn't theirs. So it is inherently immoral. Okay? All this nonsense, these lies about Jews returning back to their homeland, those are lies. Ashkenazis are not from the Middle East. They're from Europe. There were already Jews living in the Middle East before the first Aliyah. Before Zionism ever began, there were already Jews living in the Middle East.
I think it's completely wrong. So I believe all Palestinian people should have exactly the same rights as you and I and every Israeli.
And that requires the end of Zionism. So therefore you support the end of Zionism.
Well, I don't agree with what has clearly been a form of occupation, okay? But putting that to one side...
But yet he advances the lies and the agenda of Zionism.
I also don't agree with Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis, funded by Iran, armed by Iran, launching wave after years.
Who cares if they're armed by Iran? Israel's armed by the US and the British. Okay, who cares? Okay, they have the right to use force to kill people that are killing them. They have the right to self-defense. That is what self-defense is. It is using force to kill those who are killing you. So yes, they have the moral right to do it. Just because you call them Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis or Iran, that just because they're Muslim doesn't mean that they don't have the right to defend themselves. And if people, whoever they might be, I don't care who it is, if they're Israelis, if they're Jews, or if they're anyone else, if you are raping and killing their people and stealing their land, they have the right to defend themselves using force.
And decades of terror attacks on Israel.
Do they have air forces? Do they have? Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question.
Let me ask some questions.
Do they have air forces and air defenses?
Let me ask.
Do they have air forces and air defenses?
So it sounds like you're defending what they do.
So he can't answer that question because the answer is no. Now, Iran definitely does have an air force and air defenses, and the Houthis have some minimal air defenses. I think very old Soviet era SA-2s. But that's about it. They have been able to down a few drones, but Hamas, no. At best, they have man-pads. The Houthis, I think maybe they might have some old Soviet-era SA-2s. They were able to drive back some Israeli F-16s a few times, but for the most part, they cannot reliably take down modern aircraft.
No, I'm saying there is a complete difference between one of the most powerful armies in the world, which has literally a key unit within the Israeli military, Unit 9900, is the visual unit which uses satellites in the sky that can pick off a bit of chewing gum on your shoe, okay? You're talking about actors that are shooting rockets which do not have precise targeting against one of the most powerful air forces in the world.
It sounds to me,
F-15s, F-16s, and F-35. You're talking about asymmetrical warfare. But you know the thing that Israel doesn't remember, and which Israel has to know and must know, that winning a war is not about killing on an industrial scale the weakest among the population you are targeting, which Israel excels at, which is the essence of Zionism. Winning a war is about the largest amount of people being convinced of your viewpoint. If we use that metric to understand this war, Israel has lost in Gaza and it will lose in Lebanon because Israel has more enemies around the world than ever before. More people are critical of Zionism than ever before. More people understand it to be essentially an anti-life ideology, which is causing mass human suffering.
But Lowkey, at the same time, Hamas, Hezbollah are wedded, and make no secret of being wedded, to the destruction of Israel.
Because they stole their land. Okay, you can't steal someone else's land and kill their people and rape their people and then cry victim. That's sick. And like, what's so ironic is that Israel was literally founded on Jewish terrorism. The bombing of the King David Hotel was a British target. Menachem Begin murdered over 90 people in that terrorist attack. Israel made Menachem Begin, a Jewish terrorist, the sixth prime minister of Israel. And he's crying about the people who are fighting to take their land back. That's their land. That's not the land of the Ashkenazis. Okay, Zionism was an Ashkenazi separatist movement. They stole land that didn't belong to them. So the displaced people have every moral right. I don't care about the legal right. I don't care about what Piers Morgan says. They have the moral right to use force to take it back. End of story.
The destruction. That is a nihilistic form of genocide. The very genocide.
No, nihilistic. That's so ironic. By the way, the founder of Zionism, Theodore Herzl, was an atheist. Just going to throw that out there.
That his supporters, like you, would say is being waged against their people. They are explicit. We want the destruction of Israel. And they have,
because they stole their land.
Tried to enact this on October the 7th, and Hezbollah's response the next day, within hours, was to unleash rockets on Israel as well and to carry on doing it for a year.
Yeah, because asking nicely doesn't work, stupid. Okay, if you say pretty please with sugar on top, Israel's not going to do shit. They only understand force. I don't like it. I don't like that this is how humanity is, but that's how humanity is. Okay, take it up with our genes. Take it up with the essence of being a human. That is what humanity is. We kill each other. Well, what do you want me to do about it? What do you want him to do about it? What do you want anyone to do about it? You have to use force. That's just reality. Call it realpolitik. Call it whatever you want. But asking nicely, saying pretty please, is not going to work.
Here. At some point, Israel obviously was going to respond with massive force to the biggest attack on its people. Obviously, they were going to do that. Hamas knew they would do that. Iran, who were funding it, knew they were going to do that. Hezbollah knew they would do that. Hezbollah knew if they kept rattling the Israel cage with their rockets, that they would get a response of the kind we're seeing now. What they underestimated is that Israel would be quite as successful as they're being right now with Hezbollah, and taking out all its command leadership. And you can feel that the momentum has switched now, where Israeli people, in particular, and all the polling, are now beginning to go back to supporting Netanyahu, because they believe, rightly or wrongly, but they believe Hamas and Hezbollah when they say, we want to destroy Israel. They believe it, and they believe that they have to defend themselves. Do you understand that?
I have a response. The Likud platform, which is its charter, states very clearly there will be no Palestinian sovereignty between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea.
I just want to add really quickly, the Likud party is actually Irgun. When I was talking about Jewish terrorism, the Jewish terrorist organization that Menachem Begin was part of, that bombed the King David Hotel, that Jewish terrorist organization was called Irgun. Once Israel was founded, they simply changed the name of Irgun to Likud. Menachem Begin was the founder of the Likud party. It's the same thing. Literally, the ruling party of Israel is a Jewish terrorist organization.
The Likud charter calls for the complete obliteration of Palestine and all of the rights of Palestinians. That is the core of the issue. One group that you're talking about don't have air defenses and do not have an air force. Are internationally isolated.
As you know.
And are internationally isolated.
And yet they were
the
somehow,
other one has the support of the United States, which has over around 1,000 military bases around the world, and of course, all of the largesse from literally the US after Israel has taken its terrorist actions, which the former head of the CIA, Leon Panetta, called it a form of terrorism in Lebanon with the pager attack. Right after that, the US has said it's going to give $8.7 billion in military aid to Israel.
Was what Hamas did in October.
I wonder what Piers Morgan thinks about that pager attack. Does he condemn that pager attack? Because the guy who punched him in the face, Jeremy Clarkson, he condemned it. He wrote a pretty good article talking about the pager attack that Israel did, which murdered many people, including children. People, like all these Zionists want to say that, oh, it was a precision targeting of Hezbollah terrorists. No, it wasn't. Children were killed in that. And the rest of the world was appalled, to put it nicely. That completely backfired in their face, no pun intended. The pager attack was a heinous crime and it made a lot of people very uneasy, because if Israel can do that, then not just Israel, but anyone could potentially do a supply line chain attack like that to plant explosives in any of our devices. Because if Hezbollah couldn't even detect that, how can anyone else can? That's insane. And Hezbollah was on high alert. They were at war with Israel, and they couldn't notice it because it was literally these explosives were embedded inside of the battery. That's insane.
With the 7th, an act of terrorism, then?
I would say that the killing by the Israeli Air Force of Israeli citizens was an act of terror. I would say that Palestinians who have lived in camps for several generations, they're not in our shoes. They're not living the kind of lives that we live in the places
but you haven't
that
answered
we
my
live.
question.
But I'm answering your question. To a Palestinian who has suffered their entire life under the boot of Israeli occupation, what you view as justified will not be what they view as justified.
No, I asked you what you think.
Very same way, the very same way that you denounce figures and define them depending to these particular legislatory definitions. Throughout history, the very same people.
I understand.
You compared yourself to Nelson Mandela.
I understand.
The ANC were absolutely treated in exactly the same way. The FLN were treated in exactly the same way. The Vietnamese were treated in exactly the same way.
Okay.
I'm speaking directly to your point.
You're not,
in fact, William Cuffey of the Chartists, these were people that mobilized for hundreds of years to get the right to vote that didn't own property and were not landed gentry in this country. Do you know what happened to them? They were imprisoned as terrorists.
Okay.
They were massacred at Manchester.
I know the same history you do, but I simply asked you, given that you categorise what Israel did to Hezbollah with the pages, whether you said it was an act of terror, whether you think what Hamas did to Israelis on October 7th was an act of terror.
Okay, like, I really hate these stupid arguments about what is terror, what is terrorism. Look, this has already been discussed to death, and Piers Morgan already understands this, so he's being disingenuous. Terrorism is a political word, okay? It just refers to political violence that is unsupported and is opposed. Political violence that is supported, which the United States and the British government have supported, that is called freedom fighting. Okay, you may have heard of the Contras in Nicaragua. Those people were terrorists, but America was supporting them to overthrow the communist government in Cuba, if I'm recalling correctly. Those Contras were terrorists, but America was supporting them. They killed, and in fact, not only did they kill civilians, America was encouraging them to attack quote unquote soft targets, which were civilian targets. It's so sick to learn about how America supports terrorism and Israel as well. I mean, I've talked about this many times before. Israel created and funded Hamas, just so you guys know. I made a video about that, and I talked about it before, but it's worth saying over and over again. Israel created and funded Hamas. The current president of Syria right now, al-Jolani, was an ISIS terrorist. He was funded by Israel and the United States. Okay, he was an ISIS terrorist. He is an ISIS terrorist, and he was also part of Al-Qaeda. So America funds terrorism. Like, it is so gross to see how hypocritical these pieces of shit really are. Stop asking whether or not this is terrorism or that is terrorism. Look, terrorism, unfortunately, is a perspective. It's a point of view. One person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, which is exactly why Jewish supremacists support Menachem Begin, including David Zaslav, who is the CEO of the parent company of CNN, which is Warner Brothers Discovery. David Zaslav is a Jew whose hero is Menachem Begin, the Jewish terrorist that I was talking about before that bombed the King David Hotel, killing over 90 people. To him, though, that Jewish terrorist was a freedom fighter because David Zaslav is a Zionist.
As I said to you then, the picture is not clear of what exactly Hamas did to Israelis. There were lies about 40 beheaded babies that were pumped out all over the place. Yeah. No. There was so much fake news and lies on what happened on October 7th. How can we actually say...
Have you watched the Hamas footage that they took themselves?
Seen bits and pieces.
Bits and pieces?
Yeah.
Literally bits and pieces of people's bodies.
No.
No?
What
really?
I don't understand...
Has Piers watched all the videos of all the children in Gaza being burned alive? I saw videos of children being burned alive because the IDF bombed them. Rampant killings. Thousands. This is sick. And Piers Morgan can't get off the what about Hamas bullshit. What about October 7th bullshit. He won't shut the fuck up about that.
You haven't seen it,
I don't understand.
Why don't you want to see it?
I'm happy to see it, but what I don't understand, no, as in I would like to see these things, but what I'm saying to you, that you are seeming to minimize, in my opinion, is the fact that the Hannibal Directive was implemented. If the Hannibal Directive was implemented, if a fake news campaign was rolled out...
I'm about to read you something.
Read.
A July 2024 Haaretz investigation revealed the IDF ordered the Hannibal Directive to be used, adding, Haaretz does not know whether or how many civilians and soldiers were hit due to these procedures, but the cumulative data indicates that many of the kidnapped people were at risk exposed to Israeli gunfire, even if they weren't the target. In other words, there may well have been a directive issued, says Haaretz, but nobody knows whether anyone was even hit or killed.
Look at
that. It's Haaretz trying to give plausible deniability. Okay, the order. Well, first of all, we already seen the photos and the videos. I mean, that proves that they did it. But then we also have the testimony of soldiers who did it, who admitted that they did it. They couldn't live with themselves. They confessed. Man, stop platforming their lies, Piers.
Look at the cars fleeing the Nova Festival.
I've watched the video footage of what Hamas did to people in the cars. But here's my point, Lowkey. Here's my point, Lowkey.
No, Piers. He's saying look at the photos of all of the burned out cars. There's tons of them. Okay, Hamas didn't do that.
Let me finish. My point is, You have extrapolated this and you've taken it to hundreds of people in the 1,200 that were said to have been killed were killed by Israelis.
Yeah, yeah.
There is absolutely...
That's documented.
There is zero evidence.
No, there is.
The hundreds of people were killed.
Read the Electronic Intifada, read The Grey Zone, read Al Jazeera, look at the Al Jazeera documentary, you'll see
in
it
July this year, there is no evidence.
No, actually...
Haaretz didn't say that they didn't, that the IDF didn't enact the Hannibal Directive. In fact, they admitted that the order was given. Man, what a fucking moron.
There is evidence, and
Why didn't they?
Haaretz pointed some of it out early on.
They didn't. I've just read
At the Eretz crossing, they pointed out that an airstrike was called in.
I've just read to you what they found.
Well, you've read one article which clearly shows that the Hannibal Directive was implemented.
No, a Haaretz investigation.
If an Apache helicopter shoots at a car, what happens to the car? Do you think Hamas? Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the use of AK-47s would cause the damage that was done to those cars fleeing the festival? It wouldn't.
I think because you have chosen not to view the footage.
Okay, so he didn't answer the question. So the answer to that, to what he's saying, and that's an excellent point. So Piers Morgan doesn't know shit about military hardware and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys remember, but years ago, Piers Morgan was actually on CNN, and he was a big opponent to gun rights. Like, he wanted to outlaw guns in America, even though this guy's a British guy who's not even from our country. So he didn't know shit about guns. And honestly, most liberals don't know anything about guns. The answer to Lowkey's question is that no, AK-47s cannot do that kind of damage to cars. A 30-millimeter autocannon firing incendiary rounds and perhaps high explosive rounds could very well do that. Hellfire missiles could very well do that. Rockets, especially if they're loaded up with incendiary warheads. I don't know the exact armaments that were used and whether or not they were incendiary or high explosive, but what I do know for a fact is AK-47s cannot do that. They cannot do that kind of damage. So that proves that Israel did it.
The Hamas broadcast to the world, you are incredibly ill-informed about this. And my advice to you,
ill-informed. Piers Morgan doesn't even know what an AK-47 can do to a car. Okay, it's just firing bullets. It doesn't do incendiary damage. What a moron!
Given how engaged you are in this whole thing, I'm staggered you just haven't watched that footage. Then you wouldn't be asking me these questions.
But to the wider issue of what we're talking about, this is far, far bigger than one day.
Yeah, but I'm only asking you...
It's almost become a religion, October 7th.
Understand.
Let's be clear.
But I only asked you one comparison.
Something...
You view what Israel did to Hezbollah, who've been firing rockets at them all year, displacing 70,000 people in northern Israel. You view what they did with those pages as an act of terrorism. I simply said to you, do you think...
Does he think that's an act of terrorism, blowing up pagers? I would love to know. He can answer that question, Piers.
What Hamas did on October 7th is an act of terrorism. And you've been really struggling to give a straight answer. You're trying to distract me by saying Hannibal Directive, hundreds were killed.
Let me ask you a question. Do you believe in the provisions of the Genocide Convention?
I do not believe what Israel's doing is waging genocide.
That's not what I'm asking.
Do you know why?
It's not what I'm asking you. It's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is Article 1 of the Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of Genocide says that all parties that are part of this are under obligation to prevent the occurrence of genocide and punish those responsible for its commission. There is a sound argument.
How many people live in Gaza? How many people live in Gaza?
2 million people live in Gaza.
How many have been killed?
Well...
what a moron. That is not a metric for genocide. Okay, you don't assess genocide based upon a percentage of the total population. It goes by intent. Okay? And if you can't say a genocide is going on when it's happening, then that would necessarily imply that it can only be stated after the genocide is already done. And we are not going to wait for that, Piers, you stupid fuck. The only thing that matters is intent. And yes, Israel is committing genocide. They are deliberately trying to exterminate the Gazan population.
I mean, the Lancet Medical Journal has put forth the assertion that 200,000 people's lives have been ended by Israel's operation.
Well, it's completely untrue.
But that's the Lancet Medical Journal. So the Lancet Medical Journal is a more trustworthy source than you. The Palestinians are saying 42,000 as of today.
The Palestinian Hamas-run.
No, but that's not how genocide works. But that's not how genocide works.
Oh man, like it's so annoying when he says Hamas run. Hamas is the elected government of Gaza. What do you want? Okay, that's like saying the Democrat run blah 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 or the Republican run blah blah blah. Hamas is the political party. Like this is a misconception that Piers is making. Hamas is not the military arm of Gaza. Okay, Hamas is a political party. The military of Hamas is the I'm forgetting the name of it now. Oh man, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it doesn't matter. It's not the same thing. The military, and in fact, on October 7th, by the way, there were other militia groups. It wasn't just the armed wing of Hamas. There were other militia groups involved. But yeah, it's anything that is government run in Gaza is going to be run by Hamas because they are the government. What a dumbass.
Piers. No, but you know that's not how genocide works.
No, I'm about to tell you.
But you know that's not how genocide works.
So you don't believe the Palestinian Health Authority numbers?
No, I believe them. But what I'm saying
you think 5 times as many people have been killed?
I've literally just quoted to you what the Lancet Medical Association has said, and I've also quoted to you what they have said.
You know why
there.
it matters,
But
right?
that's also not how genocide works.
I share a lot of your misgivings about the scale and proportionate response of what's been going on in Gaza, and I've said that repeatedly.
Doesn't sound like it.
But I don't think it constitutes a genocide because Israel has the power, should it want to kill all 2 million.
But this is not the argument.
Let me finish.
That's not what constitutes genocide, though.
They have the power to eradicate every single Palestinian.
Was genocide committed on the Aboriginal people of...
So, real quick, I know what Piers was going to say. They have the power to exterminate every single person in Gaza. If they did that, it would just validate what the world has been saying. So obviously, Israel doesn't want to make it obvious what they're doing. Okay, they're deliberately doing this slowly. They want it to be slow, a slow death. So they're using methods like starvation, withholding aid, no electricity going into Gaza, no clean water going into Gaza, no water purification. It's a slow death. They don't want to exterminate every single Palestinian all at once because then it would validate. And the biggest defender of Israel couldn't deny it at that point because you'd see millions of dead bodies. So that's why, Piers. It's not because they're good people. It's not because they're not committing a genocide, you idiot.
Of Australia.
Well, I'm not going to go over the whole history.
They still
of genocide.
exist, so therefore your argument is that they were not subject to genocide following the arrival of Captain Cook.
But do you accept that what Hamas and Hezbollah, when they say they want destruction of Israel, that is the purest personification of genocide?
I have clearly shown you that the Likud Charter states within it that the Palestinians will have no sovereignty.
Why do you never answer any question?
See, like because Piers, he refuted your argument. He pointed out how the Likud party has the same position regarding Palestine. So his argument was already refuted, and he just repeated it.
It's about the other
river
side, though,
and the sea.
I asked both.
Because there's a causal connection between what has happened.
But you distract on everything I say. You're talking
to me. You're talking to me about organisations that were formed to fight the Israeli occupation. Their response to that occupation is what it is. The occupation exists first. Zionism exists first. What comes after it is a product of that social imbalance.
So you would categorise what they've been doing as resistance, not terrorism?
They are resistance groups, as the vast majority of the humanity is represented by governments that define them as resistance factions, including the government of Switzerland. What's more neutral than the government of Switzerland? It doesn't prescribe these organisations, for the record.
So to be clear, you think they're resistance, not terrorists?
Yes.
OK, we got there. Let me bring in Bridget Gabriel. Bridget, you listen to what Lowkey has to say. He's not alone in this thought. I've heard this from many pro-Palestinian guests on Uncensored in the last year. What is your response?
Well, I want to start with the accusation of the occupation. Israel was minding its own business ever since it existed. It reached.
Okay, this bitch is a moron. Should I skip over her stupidity? I wonder. Like maybe we could skip over her dumbassery because I really don't care. When you start the whole thing with Israel was minding its own business. No, you can't start with a lie and then expect me to take anything you say seriously, you dumb bitch. Let's just skip over her entire segment because this video is already getting kind of long. We don't need to go through every little thing. And I do want to get to the part about Lowkey confronting him about Rupert Murdock. Hopefully, I didn't skip over it, but let's find out.
I'll answer your question in a second.
She's made an admission that she condemns it.
No, she condemns the expansion of settlements.
Fine. Lowkey.
And these people also fund
Lowkey.
her.
At some point, you are going to... At some point, Lowkey, you are going to have to answer some of my questions.
Which I have done.
Okay, do you condemn what Hamas did?
Do you condemn Hamas?
Not directly, you haven't answered.
I will not condemn people based on Israeli military talking points.
Okay, good.
But I have a question for you.
I have a question for you. You don't condemn mass murder?
Obviously, I condemn mass murder.
But you won't condemn it by Hamas?
You're talking about a specific political context in which the information
No, I'm talking about
clear.
Mass murder of people on October the 7th.
By the Israeli military.
You see, it's just absurd.
So I have a question for you.
I think you lose all credibility when you say that.
I have a question for you. I'm not concerned about whether you think or don't think I have credibility. It's not
I don't come at this from supporting either over the other.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
Absolutely
Because I have a question.
What's your question?
Rupert Murdock, News Corp International, which employed you for several years.
Yes.
Which actually
it employs me now.
It employs you now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting to the issue.
Yes. What do you think the issue is? I saw what you tweeted. What does it have to do with me?
Not my tweets.
He's so nervous. That's why he keeps on interrupting him. Every time Piers Morgan gets nervous, he interrupts constantly because he doesn't want to be revealed. This is good.
I have a question for you. News Corp International had a charitable arm which funded the Jerusalem Foundation, which builds illegal settlements.
What's this got to do with me?
Illegal settlements in
What's it got to do with me?
Being paid by Rupert Murdock.
What's it got to do with me?
Do you condemn Rupert Murdock?
I'm not talking about Rupert Murdock.
Being paid by Rupert Murdock does have to do with you, you moron. Let's rewind a little bit.
With me.
Do you condemn Rupert Murdock?
What's it got to do with me?
Do you condemn Rupert Murdock?
I'm not talking about Rupert Murdock.
Do you condemn Rupert Murdock?
I'm not talking about Rupert Murdock.
This has never been shown on British media. This is a letter from Netanyahu's political office. And Bridget may well recognize the handwriting of Benjamin Netanyahu here. It is a list of individuals that Netanyahu considered to be funders of his political campaign. There is a name on this list. The name is Rupert Murdock. Your employer.
You know what, Lowkey?
It seems he funded Benjamin Netanyahu. That's an issue.
You know what, Lowkey? It's not an issue for me.
It's an issue, and actually it's in the interest of objectivity that you state it.
Rupert Murdock can speak for himself. You've got a problem with him, take it up with him.
I do.
I can tell you categorically, he has never had a single...
Where's Rupert Murdoch's show? You know? Piers Morgan has a show, and he's being paid by Rupert Murdoch. Where's Rupert Murdoch's show? Talentless hack who pays other people to be his mouthpiece.
Conversation with me about anything I put on Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Sam kindly resigned from the Times newspaper because of Murdoch's investment and bias towards Israel. If you have a problem, this document, this letter,
you're a rapper,
clearly shows Benjamin Netanyahu noting Rupert Murdoch, considering him to be a funder of his political campaign.
You're a rapper, yeah?
That's an issue.
You're a rapper. Do you condemn P. Diddy?
Yes.
Great. You see how easy it is? You take it out of your obsession, which is that you hate Israel so much you can't condemn anything that people do to them?
We see the situation differently.
Not really.
My loyalty is to the people.
I agree with you a lot more. I agree with you a lot more than you realise.
I view myself as loyal to the people of the camps, to the people under the bombs. I do not view myself as loyal to somebody that would end up on a list of potential funders of Benjamin Netanyahu.
I like Rupert Murdoch enormously. I respect him enormously. And if you
won't condemn his
and he respects the money that he's being paid by Rupert Murdoch. Okay, you gotta remember this guy's been kicked off of so many shows. Like Piers Morgan has been kicked off of so many shows. He used to be on CNN. Okay, until he was fired. Okay? He has respect for the people who pay him, and then he's willing to advance Jewish supremacy, Zionism, and genocide as long as he's being paid enough to do it. This guy's scum.
If you have a
Funding of
problem,
Murdoch, of
if you have,
Netanyahu, you won't condemn his funding
mate,
of Netanyahu.
you don't condemn
and
mass murder.
you don't condemn mass murder.
Oh, I do.
Condemn the Israeli military for mass murdering Israeli captives.
Had you bothered to watch this program for the last year, you would see I've regularly condemned
it's
them.
not.
You'll notice he just skipped over that entire point. Piers Morgan does not condemn Israel for murdering its own people on October 7th in that mass Hannibal. And that little gotcha thing that Piers Morgan tried to do with Haaretz, that actually was the proof. He proved it. Haaretz reported that the order was given. What do you think? That the IDF just ignored that order? Of course they followed it, and they admitted it.
It's not condemnation.
No,
It's
but
not,
you
it's
don't
not
think that
Piers.
what
It's
Hamas
not
did was
Piers.
murder, do you? You think it's resistance?
I think the vast majority of humanity perceive asymmetrical warfare by developed militaries against. The vast majority of humanity are post-colonial subjects, Piers. They came out of decolonization. So
Okay.
their conception of these issues is just not the same as yours, unfortunately.
We will have to disagree, but that's fine.
No problem.
All right. It was good to meet you. Thank you for coming in. Brigitte, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
All right, yeah. I don't want to end it on her ugly face. All right, so I love that at the end. The big take a fish, take a trout and slap Piers Morgan in his smug fucking face with the exposing his bias. And there likely is more to it than that. There were some photos of Piers Morgan being buddy with Jeffrey Epstein and I guess whatever that woman's name was, Jeffrey Epstein's woman. I forgot her name. I don't care. But that's a tale for another time. Piers Morgan's a piece of shit. But even as a piece of shit, at least he in all fairness, he does criticize Israeli mouthpieces, spokespeople from time to time a little bit. I've seen it, which is more than I can say about Jewish supremacists like Ben Glib or David Pakman and some other like Jews on the left, honestly, because these Jews are Jewish supremacists. They will blindly defend Israel no matter what. Whereas Piers Morgan, as much of a loathsome sack of fucking shit that he is, he does push back occasionally because that's the fundamental difference that liberals don't understand. There is a fundamental difference between Jewish Zionists and non-Jew Zionists. Non-Jew Zionists don't have a particular profound emotional interaction with Israel. And they largely do not pay people to support Israel. Rupert Murdock, I don't think he's a Jew, so he might be the one exception to this. But I don't think Rupert Murdock particularly cares that much about Israel. I think he cares about political clout, influence, and favors. When you have powerful people as friends who are on your payroll, they can do favors for you in one way or another. I think that's really what that's about. But going back to my point, non-Jew Zionists are largely the recipients of money in order to support Israel, whereas Jewish Zionists usually pay people to support Israel. And they also commit crimes against them if anyone criticizes Israel, including, but not limited to, blackmail, slander, harassment, death threats, swatting. Jewish Zionists do these things. Non-Jewish Zionists, they don't do these things. They'll call you anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel, but they don't do the criminal stuff. Piers Morgan's a piece of shit, though. See you guys later.